You know that moment in a movie when time slows down? When everything goes silent except for the pounding in your own chest? That was me, standing in the middle of a candlelit dining room, holding a champagne flute in a shaking hand, as my little brother Michael announced that he was marrying my ex-wife. I wasn't angry, I wasn't shocked. I was impressed. Impressed by the sheer audacity. Impressed that he could look me in the eyes, in front of our parents, cousins, uncles, and old family friends, and pretend like this wasn't the biggest betrayal of my life. He stood there, all smug and glowing, like a man who'd just pulled off the heist of the century, while Natalie clung to his side in a skin-tight designer dress that still bore the style I remembered picking out for her. And everyone knew. The room might have been quiet, but the silence said it all. My father's knuckles whitened around his wineglass. My mother opened her mouth and then closed it again, as if unsure whether to scream or faint. Natalie had always been good at keeping secrets, but even she couldn't hide the flicker of nervousness in her eyes as she scanned the room. And Michael. He basked in it. The tension, the discomfort, my humiliation. He wanted a scene. He was hoping I'd snap, maybe shout, storm out, or crumble into some pathetic mess of bitterness and broken pride. But I didn't give him that. Instead, I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I'd been waiting for this exact moment. And I was ready. I rose from my chair slowly, deliberately, like I wasn't just reacting, but executing a plan I'd rehearsed 100 times in my head. I raised my glass, let the light hit it, and locked eyes with Michael. "Congratulations," I said. "That's a bold move." The air thickened. Everyone turned to me, sensing something was coming. I let the silence stretch, holding their attention the way Michael always loved to. But tonight, the spotlight was mine. "Since we're sharing news," I added, "I'd like you all to meet my fiancé." Gasps echoed like dominoes falling. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Natalie stiffened beside Michael, visibly shaken, and from the hallway behind me, soft footsteps approached, heels clicking delicately against hardwood. And then Caroline appeared. She looked stunning, poised, elegant, calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing you're about to flip the entire narrative upside down. Her presence hit Michael like a slap. His jaw clenched. His hand dropped from Natalie's waist. And in that moment, the smirk disappeared. Caroline had history with Michael. Deep history. They were together for almost 8 years. From their first kiss behind the bleachers in high school to their final screaming match in her old apartment 3 years ago. He never quite forgave her for walking away. He never got closure. And here she was now, walking into my life, wearing an engagement ring I'd slipped on her finger just 2 days ago. We hadn't told anyone. We'd kept it quiet, waiting for the right moment. But when Michael sent that polished gold-foiled invitation to his surprise engagement celebration, I knew. He wanted to rub it in my face. He wanted power, control, and I wasn't going to let him have it. Caroline stepped beside me, slipped her arm around mine, and gave the room a dazzling smile. "We're very happy," she said softly, "and we didn't think it needed to be a competition, but it is now, isn't it? That line, cut through the tension like a blade." Michael's eyes darted between us, scrambling for control, for explanation, for the upper hand. "Wait, what?" he muttered, his voice breaking. "You're marrying her." And that's when I saw it. Not just shock, but fear. Real, raw fear. The kind that bubbles up when you realize the game you were playing just turned against you. The rest of the evening unraveled like a fever dream. My mom cried, out of confusion more than joy. My father stood stiffly, trying to process everything like a math equation that wouldn't balance. Natalie. She looked pale. She kept glancing between Caroline and me like she couldn't quite believe this was happening. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because for 2 years, I carried the weight of her betrayal in silence. I let her go quietly, let her keep the apartment, let her rebuild her life while I picked up the pieces of mine. She said she needed space, that I was distant, cold, and maybe she was right about some of that. But what she never admitted, not to my face, was that she'd already started leaning on someone else. Someone close. Someone who looked like me, spoke like me, laughed like me. My own brother. I didn't find out all at once. It was in fragments. A weird text thread she left open on her laptop. Michael showing up more often, always with that just checking in tone. Little shifts in behavior. The way they avoided eye contact when we were in the same room. At first I told myself I was being paranoid, that grief was playing tricks on me. But the evidence kept stacking, louder than her silence. And now, here they were, holding hands like nothing ever happened. But here's the thing. I'm not the same man I was back then. And this wasn't over. After the announcement, the room didn't return to normal. Not really. People tried. They lifted glasses, resumed light conversation, forced smiles. But it was like trying to sweep shattered glass under a rug. Every interaction was brittle. Every laugh too high-pitched. Every gesture a little too stiff. Eyes kept darting toward me. Caroline, Michael, and Natalie, like everyone was waiting for someone to crack. I didn't. Not then. Instead, I played the part. The composed older brother. The man who'd just gotten engaged to a woman he clearly adored. I clinked glasses with distant relatives, answered questions about how we reconnected, nodded graciously when people complimented Caroline's dress or asked if we'd set a date. She stayed close, her hand resting gently on my back, as if grounding me through the storm. But I could feel Michael's eyes on me the entire time. He wasn't celebrating anymore. He was stewing, watching, trying to figure out when and how this all happened, and more importantly, why it happened. He was always the golden child, the charming, impulsive one who made mistakes and got forgiven for them. I was the steady one, the responsible brother who worked late, paid bills on time, and quietly held the family together. That night, that dynamic shattered, because I wasn't playing the safe card anymore. About an hour into the evening, I stepped outside to get some air. The tension inside had grown suffocating, and I needed a moment to recalibrate. The backyard was lit with soft string lights, the air still and cool. I stood alone, breathing deeply, letting the night settle around me. And then I heard the footsteps. I didn't have to turn to know it was him. Michael came to stand beside me, silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost trembling. "How long?" he asked. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to make him feel what I'd felt, the ache of being left in the dark, of asking questions that were met with silence. Eventually I said, "A few months." She reached out. We started talking. It wasn't planned, it just happened. He scoffed. "Yeah, just like you think this wasn't planned, right?" That amused me. "You mean like your little surprise tonight?" The dramatic entrance. Natalie stepping into the room like she's Cleopatra returning to Rome. He bristled. I could feel the rage simmering under his skin. "You don't get to talk about Natalie like that." "No," I said, turning to face him fully. "You don't get to talk to me about betrayal." The words landed hard. I saw it in his face. The realization that there was no spin, no charm he could pull to escape what he'd done. For the first time, he looked guilty. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said weakly. But I'd waited years to hear that, and now it just sounded pathetic. "That's the thing with people like you, Michael. You never mean for things to happen. You just do whatever feels good in the moment, and clean up the mess later." He tried to say something, maybe to defend himself, maybe to attack me, but I cut him off. I knew. For a long time. I just didn't say anything. He froze. "You knew?" I nodded slowly. "I saw the messages. I noticed the change in her. I saw how you looked at her. You think you're subtle, but you've always been careless. You just assumed I'd never see it, or that I wouldn't say anything if I did." The look in his eyes shifted from guilt to something colder. "So this is revenge?" I paused, letting the silence sink deep. "No," I said. "This is clarity." He didn't know how to respond to that, and honestly, I didn't expect him to. Michael had always lived in a world where consequences were theoretical, not real, but now they were standing right in front of him, in the form of me, no longer the older brother who bit his tongue, and Caroline, the one that got away now holding someone else's hand. I left him there, staring into the darkness, and walked back inside. When I rejoined the party, Caroline caught my eyes immediately. She didn't ask what happened. She just squeezed my hand and leaned in slightly, enough for me to smell the soft vanilla of her perfume, enough to remind me why I was doing this. Not just to respond to betrayal, but to choose something different. Better. But Natalie wasn't done, because 20 minutes later, she cornered me in the hallway near the restroom. The music and chatter from the dining room faded behind us. Her expression was taut, her eyes darting to make sure no one saw us talking. "You really think she loves you?" she asked, her voice sharp, bitter. I met her gaze, and for the first time since the divorce, I felt no desire, no sadness, no longing, just calm. "I know she respects me," I said, "and that's already more than I ever got from you." Natalie's face hardened. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "You made one, 2 years ago, and now you're just watching it come home." She didn't reply. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking too fast, her shoulders tense. And I knew deep down, this wasn't the last I'd hear from either of them. Because people like Michael and Natalie don't let go easily. They don't move on. They dig in. And as I would soon find out, they weren't done trying to take something from me. In the days that followed the engagement party, I expected fallout. Awkward family group chats, maybe a couple of passive-aggressive texts from Michael, or even a cold call from Natalie dripping with fake grace. But what I didn't expect was silence. That was worse. Because silence from people like them doesn't mean peace. It means plotting. Caroline and I returned to our normal routine, or at least, what passed for normal after dropping that kind of bomb. We laughed about the expressions on everyone's faces, especially my father's, stuck between shock and indigestion. But beneath the humor was a tension neither of us fully voiced. It wasn't over. It had just started. Then, 3 weeks later, the phone calls began. First from a mutual friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, suddenly calling to catch up. But 5 minutes into the conversation, he casually dropped that Michael had been saying some things. That Caroline had always had a thing for me, even when she was dating Michael. That maybe she'd been the reason their relationship fell apart in the first place. The implication wasn't subtle. Maybe I'd stolen her back then, too. I brushed it off, told myself it was Michael lashing out, trying to rewrite history to feel less like a victim. But it kept happening. Another call, then a message. Then I heard from my aunt, someone deeply traditional, who'd always championed family above all. She warned me that Natalie had been visiting my parents. "She seems upset," she said carefully, as if she didn't want to take sides. Caroline noticed the shift, too. One morning over breakfast, she looked up from her phone and said, "Do you think Michael would really try to ruin us? Publicly?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, yeah, I did. Michael had always been two-faced, the kind of person who charmed his way through confrontation, but struck behind closed doors. Now that charm had run dry, he had only one option left: smear us both, make the story palatable for the people who still mattered to him, and in his version, he was the wounded brother, and I was the one who betrayed him. But what he didn't understand was, I wasn't scared of his lies. I was scared of how familiar his tactics felt. See, when Natalie and I had been married, she used silence and suggestion like knives. She'd never argue, just withdraw. Let me question myself. Let me feel the void. And every time something felt off, a missed dinner, a vague excuse, a strange phone call, she'd turn it on me. "You're just paranoid. You never trust me." Now, years later, it felt like déjà vu. Only this time, she had Michael in her corner, and they weren't just whispering to friends and family so. They were planting seeds. I found out through a client, of all people. "I heard an odd rumor," he said halfway through a lunch meeting. Someone said you were dating your brother's girlfriend before the divorce. He meant it casually, like office gossip, but it hit me like a gut punch. Not because it was true, but because it was spreading. Caroline saw the look on my face when I got home. She didn't ask, just poured 2 glasses of wine and sat beside me on the couch, quiet. I thought they were just going to be angry, I said eventually. I didn't think they'd try to destroy us. She nodded slowly. Michael always needed to win. And Natalie, she hates being replaced. There was a long pause between us. I could see the worry in her eyes. Not just about the gossip, but what it could do to us. To me. My job involved sensitive relationships. My reputation mattered. And suddenly I was becoming a character in their soap opera. The cold, cheating brother who stole his sibling's true love. The irony was cruel. Because I'd never cheated. Never even thought about Caroline that way. Until Natalie and I were over. But the truth doesn't matter when the narrative is juicier the other way. That night, I received a message that made everything crystal clear. It was from Natalie. 3 words. Let's talk. Soon. No greeting. No explanation. Just a message that felt like a rope thrown across a battlefield. Not in peace, but as bait. Caroline saw it. You're not seriously going to meet her, are you? I have to, I said. Whatever they're planning, it started with her. And I needed to know how deep it went. Because if they wanted to drag us through the mud, I wasn't going to just stand there and let them. I was going to find out everything. I agreed to meet Natalie in the most neutral place I could think of. A quiet cafe on the edge of town. Far enough from our old haunts to feel like new ground. I wore my usual armor. A pressed shirt, calm expression, no trace of nerves. But inside I was coiled tight. I hadn't seen her face to face in nearly a year, and part of me hoped I never would again. She arrived late, of course, always a flair for drama. She walked in like she was entering a stage. Flowing trench coat, oversized sunglasses, not a hair out of place. She spotted me instantly and gave a small, knowing smile, the kind that made you feel like she already knew how the conversation would end. She didn't say hello, just slid into the seat across from me and crossed her legs slowly, deliberately. So, she said, pulling off her glasses. Caroline, really? I leaned back. That's what you wanted to talk about? She gave a breathy laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. You know, it's funny. You always used to be so cautious. So careful. And now here you are, playing my game, stealing exes, stirring drama. You've changed. No, I said evenly for I just stopped letting people walk over me. Natalie tilted her head. So that's what this is? Revenge? There it was. The bait. I didn't bite. It's not revenge if it's real, I said. Caroline and I didn't plan this, but I'm not apologizing for it either. She rolled her eyes, lips tightening. You're really trying to make this a love story. She looked genuinely amused. That's rich. I studied her for a moment. For all her calm, I could see it. The twitch in her jaw, the subtle clench of her hand around her coffee cup. Caroline bothered her, not just because of the past, but because someone had dared to choose me after Natalie was done with me. She wasn't here to reminisce. She was here to rattle me. So what's your play, Natalie? I asked. Whisper rumors, twist the story, turn my own family against me. Her smile faded. You did that all on your own. I stared at her, unblinking. She broke eye contact first. You and Michael deserve each other, I said, standing. You feed off secrets and sabotage. But just so we're clear, Caroline and I, we're solid. We're not playing games. Natalie's expression hardened. Then you'd better hold on tight, because Michael's not done. I left her sitting there, alone with her bitterness and cold coffee. By the time I got home, Caroline was pacing. She stopped the moment I walked in. How bad was it? She's rattled, I said. But she's not the real problem. Michael is. And I was right, because less than a week later the bomb dropped. My boss called me into his office, face tight and professional. There'd been a concern raised by a client, an anonymous letter claiming I was involved in unethical behavior, leveraging personal relationships to gain business. There were no details, just vague accusations. But in our line of work, even smoke meant fire to the wrong people. I knew instantly who was behind it. Michael. He hadn't just whispered to friends. He was playing a long game, attacking my credibility, my career, piece by piece. I left that meeting feeling like I was walking on a minefield. Everything I'd built, everything I'd quietly suffered through for years, was being weaponized against me. When I told Caroline, her face went pale. "He's trying to ruin your life." "No," I said slowly. "He's trying to erase me. Because that's what this was. A complete rewrite. He wanted to be the brother who came out on top, the one who rescued Natalie, who exposed my schemes, who got sympathy while I got shunned. But what he didn't realize was that I wasn't the same brother he used to compete with. I wasn't trying to be the golden child anymore. I was done playing fair. So I started digging, not out of vengeance, out of necessity. Because if Michael wanted war, I needed to know what he was hiding. And deep down I knew, people like him always have secrets. They just pray you never go looking. It didn't take long to find cracks. An old friend from college reached out, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. He'd seen the engagement post and decided to say something he should have said long ago. Apparently, back in the early days of my marriage to Natalie, Michael had already been too close. There were photos. Nothing graphic, just proximity. Too many late nights. Study sessions that didn't make sense. Little things that, back then, I'd brushed off as Natalie being friendly and Michael being supportive. The affair didn't start during the divorce. It started years before. Suddenly everything clicked. The coldness, the gaslighting, the distance. I hadn't just been neglected. I'd been played. Caroline was the first person I told. Her reaction was immediate and visceral. "We can't let this go," she said. "He's trying to ruin you while pretending he's innocent. We need to hit back." But I wasn't ready to just hit back. I needed a plan. I'd taken the high road once before. It cost me my marriage, my peace, and nearly my sanity. This time, I was going to take the truth, the whole truth, and I was going to bury him with it. There's a strange kind of power in knowing the truth, especially when the people who wronged you still think they're in control. That knowledge burns hot and cold inside you at the same time. It's fury and clarity. It's the sick relief of knowing you weren't crazy all those years, that your instincts had been right, even when everyone else made you feel wrong. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering more than just whispers and memories. I needed proof, something undeniable, something that would force everyone, including my parents, to see what I had endured in silence. With the help of my college friend, I got my hands on old group photos, dated texts, even an email Natalie had sent that had been archived in a shared folder. It was almost too convenient, like the universe had been waiting for me to finally take action. Every thread I pulled exposed another layer. My gut twisted as I uncovered hotel receipts and credit card statements. Nights when Natalie had told me she was with friends, but was really staying in the city. I matched dates with Michael's social media, business trips, that perfectly aligned. The betrayal went back at least 3 years before our divorce. 3 years. And now, they stood in front of everyone, my family, acting like this love story had blossomed from a place of mutual heartbreak, when in reality it was built on lies, manipulation, and deceit. My brother didn't fall in love with my ex-wife. He stole her, long before she became my ex. And now he wanted to erase me, professionally, socially, even within our own family. I wasn't going to let him. Not quietly. The perfect opportunity came wrapped in ribbon. My parents' wedding anniversary. A huge family event, hosted at a private venue, with a guest list that included cousins, old friends, family friends, even my dad's business partners. It was meant to be a celebration of unity, commitment, and love. How poetic. Caroline and I arrived early, calm and collected. I had my evidence tucked neatly into a sleek black envelope. Not dramatic, just surgical. If Michael wanted to play chess, I was about to show him I'd mastered the endgame. The room slowly filled, warm with laughter and clinking glasses. Michael and Natalie walked in late. Again, the grand entrance. All eyes turned to them. My mother clasped her hands together like they were royalty. My father gave them a polite nod, but I noticed the way his jaw clenched when Natalie kissed his cheek. People hadn't forgotten what she'd done. They were just trying to make it palatable. Michael smirked when he saw me. That same smug confidence he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. He even walked over and offered a hand like we were on good terms. I didn't take it. I simply nodded and said, "I hope you enjoy tonight. It's going to be memorable." Then I walked away, letting that sentence sink like a stone in his gut. Midway through the night, when the speeches started, I waited. My father spoke first, heartfelt, gracious, nostalgic. My mother followed, her voice trembling with emotion. Everyone clapped, tears glimmering in a few eyes. Then Michael stood up, ever the performer. He talked about family, about loyalty, about how our parents were the example he hoped to follow with Natalie. "It's not always easy to find your person," he said, "but when you do, you fight for them." I could barely hold back a scoff. That was my cue. I stood up slowly, envelope in hand. All eyes turned. Even the music faded. Caroline gave me a small nod, her support steady behind me like a lighthouse in a storm. "I'd like to say a few words," I began. "Not just to celebrate my parents, who, despite everything, have always led with honesty, but to speak a little truth tonight." Michael tensed. Natalie looked suddenly pale. "I've been quiet for a long time," I continued. "Out of respect, out of shame, maybe even out of fear. But that ends tonight." I opened the envelope and pulled out the first photo. Grainy, old, but clear enough. Michael and Natalie. Too close, laughing in a way you don't laugh with your brother's wife. I handed it to my father. Then the email. Then the receipts. One by one, passed down the table like damning pages in a courtroom. "I didn't lose Natalie in the divorce," I said. "I lost her years before. To him, while I was working late, planning our future. My own brother was busy rewriting it behind my back." Gasps. A fork clattered to the floor. And when the truth finally came out, they pretended it was fate. They said it just happened. But betrayal like this doesn't just happen. It's built. Brick by brick, lie by lie. I turned to look at my brother. His face white with panic, lips parted like he couldn't find the right words for the first time in his life. And just recently, I added, voice lower now, dead calm, someone tried to sabotage my career. Anonymous reports, fabricated complaints. I don't have proof that it was Michael. Yet. But given the history, I think we can all guess. Silence blanketed the room. My parents looked stunned. My mother sat frozen, while my father looked down at the damning papers like they were foreign objects. And then softly I added, "You want to talk about love, Michael? Love isn't what you feel when you win. Love is what you protect, what you don't steal." I sat back down. No applause, no cheers. Just silence. Heavy, awkward, real. And then someone, I think one of my cousins, slowly stood up and walked out, followed by another. And another. Michael stood there, blinking. Natalie didn't move. Her hands were clenched so tight in her lap. Her knuckles had turned white. The cracks had finally reached the surface. And now it was just a matter of time before it all fell apart. Some were from relatives who had no idea, expressing support, asking if I was okay. Others were more hesitant, careful, towing the line like they didn't want to pick sides. And then there were the ones who didn't call at all. I noticed those names too. People who decided silence was safer. Cowards, maybe. Or maybe they just didn't know how to handle truth when it was delivered raw and without apology. My father called just before noon. His voice was steady but lower than usual, like the weight of the revelation still sat heavy in his chest. I always thought something was off, he admitted after a long pause. But I didn't want to believe it. Not about Natalie. Not about your brother. It was the closest he'd ever come to saying sorry. My mother, on the other hand, left a single voicemail, a shaky voice telling me I'd embarrassed the family. Not that they were angry at Michael. Not that they were disappointed in Natalie. No, the problem was that I had brought it out into the open. I had disturbed the illusion, broken the facade. But I wasn't surprised. She always cared more about appearances than reality. Meanwhile, Caroline stayed by my side through it all. She didn't gloat. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply held my hand during the quiet moments and reminded me that I hadn't burned everything down. I'd just stopped pretending the fire wasn't already raging, but the fallout wasn't just emotional. It became professional. A few days after the anniversary dinner, I got a call from HR. Apparently, the anonymous complaints had been traced, not to Michael directly, but to a shell email created from a computer associated with a consulting firm he'd recently done work with. It was enough for an investigation, enough to raise alarms. I knew Michael. He was smart. He wouldn't leave obvious fingerprints, but his arrogance had made him sloppy. By the end of the week, I received formal confirmation that my name was cleared. The reports were false, fabricated. I didn't press charges. I could have, but I didn't. Not because I forgave him, but because I wanted to see what would happen when he had to sit in uncertainty, when he had to wonder what I would do next. Let him squirm. But while the professional storm was dying down, the personal one was just getting started. Michael reached out, not to apologize, of course, but to talk. The message was short, like he was pretending none of it had really happened, like we were just having a disagreement. I ignored it. Natalie didn't reach out at all. Instead, Caroline got a message. From her, a long-winded, half-apology, half-confession, about how she had been confused, trapped between two worlds, and never meant for any of this to hurt anyone. She even mentioned how seeing us together made her realize how badly she and Michael had handled things. Caroline showed it to me, her eyebrows raised. "I'm not replying," she said flatly. "I just wanted you to see the kind of nonsense your ex-wife is still capable of." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe Natalie still thought redemption came in the form of vague regret. She still didn't understand what she destroyed, what she chose to destroy. But Caroline, she understood. Every day that passed, I saw it more clearly, the contrast between a love that was honest and one that had been built on shadows. Caroline didn't just support me. She challenged me. She made me feel seen in a way I never had before. There was no competition, no manipulation, no power games. We were building something real, and still, there was one last thread I needed to pull. One last card to lay on the table. It happened at my parents' house. They'd invited both Michael and me for a family dinner. I almost said no, but something in me needed to face it. Not just for closure, but for truth. The kind of truth that doesn't come with shouting matches or public scenes. When I arrived, the air was tight. My father nodded at me. My mother pursed her lips. Michael sat stiffly on the couch, Natalie absent this time. I guessed they were keeping her away to avoid another explosion. I sat across from him, calm, collected. He couldn't meet my eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen that way," he said, the words tumbling out, rehearsed. "It started after you two were already having problems. I was just trying to be there for her. One thing led to another." I cut him off. "No, Michael. You were trying to be there for yourself. You didn't stumble into love. You trampled over mine to get to yours." He looked down. Silent. My father cleared his throat but didn't speak. "I'm not here for apologies," I continued. "I just wanted you to know. I'm done letting this define me. You and Natalie may have tried to rewrite the past, but I'm building my own future now." And then I stood. "I'm marrying Caroline next spring." That got his attention. His head snapped up. Good. Let that sit in his chest like ice. I walked out, not needing their blessing, not caring if they ever understood, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing peace. I was peace. And Michael? He could keep his stolen love and his hollow victories. Me? I had something far more valuable. I had freedom. The engagement party may have been the explosion, but the real justice came months later. Slow, calculated, inevitable. I didn't plan revenge at first. Not consciously. But once I learned how far Michael and Natalie had gone to smear my name, to turn my life into a stepping stone for theirs, I couldn't walk away. Some part of me still needed closure. Not the emotional kind, but something colder, factual and documented. I started digging. It wasn't difficult, really. Natalie had always been careless with money. When she married me, she let me handle the finances. When she left, she assumed she was entitled to everything, and for a while she tried to get it. But somewhere along the way, she must have gotten sloppy. Through a mutual contact, I discovered that Natalie and Michael had quietly taken out a business loan in my name months after our divorce. Fraud, plain and simple. I hadn't noticed before. They'd used my old business credentials, banking on the fact that I'd moved on and wouldn't notice. But now, I noticed. I passed it along to my lawyer. What followed was a chain reaction. Investigations, paper trails, a formal complaint. Then the real bombshell. The consulting firm Michael was working with dropped him after the HR debacle. But now they were also being investigated for internal misconduct. And Michael's name came up again. Suddenly, he wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was a liability. Natalie tried to separate herself from it all, acting shocked when questioned. But it was her signature on the paperwork, her email address attached to the transactions. It didn't take long before both of them were facing a lawsuit, not from me, but from the bank, the consulting firm, and eventually the IRS. They tried to spin it, of course, claimed it was a misunderstanding, a mistake. But their mistake cost them everything. Michael lost his job. Natalie was fined for fraud and had to sell her apartment to cover legal costs. Their perfect love story turned into a legal disaster. Their engagement was quietly called off not long after. I heard from someone that Natalie moved back in with her mother. Michael, rumor had it, he was couch surfing with an old college friend, barely holding things together. Meanwhile, I was rising from the ashes. My name was cleared. My career bounced back, stronger than ever. The public humiliation Michael tried to create became a cautionary tale about arrogance, betrayal, and how karma doesn't forget. Caroline and I married that spring, just like we said we would. It was small, intimate. No show, no spectacle. Just people who mattered, and one woman who reminded me what real love looks like. After the ceremony, my father approached me. His face looked older than I remembered. Tired. Like he'd aged under the weight of all that had happened. I was wrong, he said. About a lot of things. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him, waiting. He sighed. You were always the stronger one. I see that now. It didn't fix everything, but it was something. As for my mother, she sent a letter, not a call, one of those "I hope you're happy" notes that sounded more like an accusation than a blessing. I didn't reply. She chose her side long ago. Months passed and life became peaceful. Not perfect, but mine. I bought a house with Caroline outside the city, a place with space, silence, and morning light that streamed through the kitchen window just right. Then one day I got a message. From Natalie. Just a simple email. No subject line, just a few words. I'm sorry. I miss who we used to be. I read it once, then deleted it without replying, because she didn't miss me. She missed the man who forgave everything, the man she could manipulate. But that man was gone. Michael tried too. He reached out through a cousin, said he wanted to talk, maybe meet like brothers again. I told the cousin to tell him, he's not my brother. He made his choice. He can live with it. Because some betrayals don't get healed with words, only consequences. And as I stood on the balcony of my new home, watching Caroline laugh with friends on a summer evening, a glass of wine in her hand, and the sunset behind her, I realized something. I didn't just get justice. I got my life back. The kind of life that isn't shaped by revenge, but defined by the strength it took to rise above it. Let Michael and Natalie live with their ghosts. Me? I sleep just fine. And if I ever see them again, I'll smile and walk right past them. Because the final word isn't theirs. It's mine. And it's this. Funny, isn't it? You both tried to destroy me, and all you did was set me free.